our nervous systems all have this vigilance response, right? It's our survival brain, and it's what keeps us alive, right? The problem is it's really helpful when there's actual danger. The problem is if you have some kind of trauma history, right? And it might not be obvious to you, you might not even know it. You might be experiencing what we call that hypervigilance. So even when things are going okay, there's that part of your brain that's always scanning and going like, okay, when's the other shoe going to drop, right? You might not even be conscious of it.
Welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. This is a show presented by Heart and Solutions Counseling Agency. We release new episodes every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central and encourage you to batch up that laundry, put away the dishes, plan for the week ahead, or do any other task that might seem daunting while you give our show a listen. You might just be encouraged to call your therapist, connect with this week's guest, or seek out those services you've been considering for a while but haven't made the commitment to yet. If you are in the state of Iowa and are in need of mental or behavioral health counseling, give us a call at 1-800-531-4236. Enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome back to You Need a Counselor podcast. I'm Dr. Julie Johnson. This is episode 131. So welcome to the show.
And I'm Krista Hunt, and I am Vice President of Heart and Solutions, our counseling agency in Iowa. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are designed for people curious about counseling that have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
Our guest today joins us from California. She is a licensed online psychotherapist for those living in California. She's also a coach for those living anywhere else in the world. She focuses on helping people break through different cycles that we might have in our lives. Sometimes we feel like we're just going and going and going and not getting to that freedom that we desire. And so some of those cycles, that anxiety, that self-doubt, burnout, and trauma can really keep us stuck in these loops. And so our guest today helps people to break out of those cycles and to find that freedom that we're all looking for. So we've got Elisa Martiez today with us. Thank you for joining us, Elisa.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for this wonderful podcast. This is such great information to, share with folks about therapy, and especially if you're on the fence about it, right? Or you're curious.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So many people are curious about therapy, psychotherapy. And also, I think a lot of people are curious now about coaching and what the difference is and how to know if they might be benefit from psychotherapy or coaching. Can you tell us a little bit about the difference between the two services you provide?
Yeah, absolutely. So primarily, I am a licensed psychotherapist, right? So that means that I am licensed and able to treat mental disorders, mental illnesses, also treat the symptoms of mental health challenges, right? So I specialize specifically in anxiety, trauma, and burnout. So I work with a lot of really anxious achievers and burned out professionals. So that's my niche. And I'm able to kind of treat some of the underlying mental health concerns, emotional and psychological stuff, right, that we bring to the table using a variety of psychotherapeutic techniques, which are super, super effective in breaking free of those cycles. As a coach, I'm able to support people who may be having these kinds of challenges in their lives. My coaching clients, however, tend to be what we call higher functioning, right? So their mental health concerns may not be, really limiting their ability to function at a high level in their lives, at work, in the world. They may have a psychotherapist that they're seeing, right? But coaching is really more working on the level of, what are your goals? Where are the places you're stuck, and where do you want to be, and how can we get you there, right? So we're not really diving deep into the psyche, right? We're not really working with a lot of those psychological underlying issues that could be impacting the way they think and feel, like we would in psychotherapy. But there is some overlap, because the kind of coaching that I do can feel very therapeutic, right? So what I'm doing is I'm helping people, get some clarity about what's going on with them, those stuck places, and what's a plan for getting from point A to point B in a way that you're actually going to follow through on, right? And that can feel really empowering and therapeutic too. So again, there's just some overlap, but not quite the same, right? And so coaching, I do a lot of education as a therapist and as a coach. But coaching really requires that people are taking the information and the tools that I'm providing, and they are taking it and running with it, right? Psychotherapy, we do that as well. I provide a ton of tools, but really I am working with people one-on-one to really kind of do a deep dive within themselves and do a lot of healing around some of the psychological pain and distress they might feel underneath that they might not even be aware of. Right. So I know that's just, there's more to say about the difference and the similarities, but that's kind of the gist.
So what got you into the field of counseling, and what also led you to specialize in those anxiety and burnout trauma?
Yeah, great question. So I would say from a very young age, I struggled with a lot of anxiety. And, I had a lot of painful earlier life experiences, traumas, you could say, um, experiences that really impacted me. I also had a lot of loss, and I really didn't have people who I could, I'll use some therapist speak, process that loss with, right? And so, I struggled with a lot of anxiety as a child, and then it turned into depression, right? When I was a young adult, I struggled a lot with self-esteem, not feeling good about myself. And it kind of came to a head when I was in my late 20s, and had a lot of stressful life experiences. And I feel like I had a breakdown, right? You hear this like classic nervous breakdown, right? That's an old term, but I kind of went through that experience. And my life since then, since my late 20s, really became a big healing process. So I started getting therapy. I started reading about psychology, wanting to understand, what's going on with me. And then by the time I was in my late 30s, I decided, you know what, I'm going to go to grad school and study counseling psychology, mostly because I wanted to heal myself. I wanted to learn about the human mind, right? I wasn't thinking like, oh yeah, I'll be a therapist, right? So went to grad school for 3 years, and then I discovered, wow, I can actually do this. I can actually help people. And I had experienced so much healing of my own at that point. And so that's what got me into it. And I have been doing it since then. So gosh, I graduated in 2011. So I've been doing it since then. And I came to specialize in anxiety, trauma, burnout, because those are issues that are very near and dear to my heart, right? I know what it's like to be in the throes of anxiety. I know what it's like to live with trauma. And I also know what it's like to feel just the overwhelm of burnout, right? So I'm also an animal rescuer, and I have been involved in that pretty heavily, off and on over the past several years. And there's a lot of burnout, in people who are in lines, who are, helpers in that way. So yeah, that's kind of how I came to this, and I love it, right? So again, I do work exclusively with people who have different kinds of traumas. They might not even be aware that they do, but a lot of anxiety, burnout, overwhelm.
Yeah, I think the mental health field is really starting to acknowledge uh, high functioning individuals.
Mhm.
And that, that sounds kind of funny to say because, high functioning individuals get acknowledged in society quite a bit. But the mental health field has not always acknowledged high functioning individuals. There's been more understanding, communal understanding for those who are having these mental health symptoms impact their lives in a way that other people can see, or the way that other people are finding to be dysfunctional or not working as well as they would like to. And there's been this external focus on symptomology, even in the mental health field, for so long. And it's starting to have more of an inward focus that kind of takes away the how are you presenting
Mhm.
piece. Yeah, your friends might say you're doing great and your family might say you're always doing great, and
Mhm.
but none of that matters, because it's how we are feeling, it's how our internal life is working and going. And we might be able to churn out a product every day as our personality as a product, our work ethic as a product, right? We might be able to churn out that product every day, but the cost internally can be so heavy and so high, even though we're still able to do it. So I love that you are acknowledging in your practice those who are high functioning, or even sometimes extremely high functioning, and all of the challenges that do come with that. And I feel like the field is starting to acknowledge achievement as a trauma response as well. And that hasn't always been the case in this field.
Absolutely. And, I work with a ton of high achievers, right? These are professionals who are, just um, top in their field, right? Academics. And one of the questions I ask is, yeah, okay, you're doing all these cool things. What are you feeling? What's going on inside of you? What's happening inside that people don't see, right? And I love what you said about, this high achieving can be, a type of trauma response. And I think you hit the nail on the head, because a lot of times the folks I work with are struggling with what we call maybe shades of complex trauma, right? This is the kind of trauma that, might not seem so obvious, right? Like a lot of times we think, oh, I was, in this horrible car accident and traumatized from that, or I was assaulted, right? All of those can definitely lead to a traumatic response. But a lot of times, I work with a lot of folks who were raised in families where they didn't get praise, validation, a lot of support, unless they were super high achieving, right? And they had to be perfect. They had to be great, right? And that can lead to a trauma response, right? And so I work with a lot of people who are perfectionists, right? They do really, really wonderful things for themselves and the world, but it comes at such a high psychological price. Yeah. So I think that's really, really important to talk about.
Can you kind of explain like what trauma response looks like for different people who show trauma responses depending on like I know we talked about like traumatic experiences like a car accident or assault, but also trauma response for those other types as well that you discussed.
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of the folks that I work with, I see a lot of what we call this hypervigilance, right? And so we think of the word vigilant, right? And you're kind of always on the lookout, like, okay, you're scanning the environment for danger or potential danger, right? And our nervous systems all have this vigilance response, right? It's our survival brain, and it's what keeps us alive, right? The problem is it's really helpful when there's actual danger. The problem is if you have some kind of trauma history, right? And it might not be obvious to you. You might not even know it. You might be experiencing what we call that hypervigilance. So even when things are going okay, there's that part of your brain that's always scanning and going like, okay, when's the other shoe going to drop, right? You might not even be conscious of it, right? Or you might tend to expect that something bad is going to happen, right? Some people who are, very vigilant in this way, they can struggle with anxiety, right? Struggle with a lot of chronic worry. And it can become second nature to where this is just how I am. This is just, the way I'm showing up in the world. This is me, right? This can be a trauma response. So I think those are kind of the big ones that I see that I work with.
Yeah, and some of the specific challenges I would imagine in working specifically with the population that you do is that some of those symptoms, while they're painful,
Mhm.
are beneficial in the external world. And so it's much I would think in some ways it might be more difficult to see them as challenges and to be able to prioritize the internal piece when it might mean sacrificing some of that external benefit or external productivity that we might have.
And I love that you bring this up. And so, the kind of therapy that I do is, so I lean very heavily on a kind of therapy called internal family systems. I love it. The gist of it is we look at all, whether it's anxiety, whether it's this like, I need to be super high achieving, I have to be perfect, whatever it is, right? And, I have anger outbursts, no matter what. We kind of look at all of those symptoms and tendencies as parts of us, right? I have a part of me that gets really angry sometimes. I have a part of me that worries and gets really anxious. I have a part of me that has to achieve, that has to be doing, that has to be the best, right? So all of those are aspects of our personality. And so in therapy, what we can do is we can explore these different aspects, right? So I work with a lot of clients and we explore the part of themselves that really feels this drive to achieve, or that really needs that can't settle for a B grade, like always A plus, right? And we look at the ways that these parts of ourselves have really benefited us, right? And like you said, so being a high achiever, you can do a lot of really cool and great things. You can achieve a lot of success. There's a lot of benefit to that, right? If you're in a helping profession too, and you're a very high achiever, you're helping a lot of people, right? So what we do when we work with these parts of ourselves, it's like, okay, how can we kind of keep the good stuff, right? How can we acknowledge all of the wonderful things that come with this, right? Come with this super uber high achieving drive, but how can we transform it a bit so it's not so painful and distressing for you, right? Because being a perfectionist, being super driven, being super anxious, and I got to do this, I got to do that, it's not comfortable, right? And so really what it's about is how do we transform those parts of ourselves so they're functional, so they're helpful, so they enhance our lives, right? So it's really not about, our lives becoming smaller and we're, not going to be able to achieve as much. We're not going to be able to do as much. It's really about our lives becoming healthier and giving us more capacity to live the lives that we want to live. Yeah, that's kind of how I look at it. Yeah.
Are there different techniques that you use with your counseling clients as opposed to coaching clients? Are they pretty similar?
Some are different, some are the same, right? I mentioned that I use a lot of what we call internal family systems, or we call this parts work, right? This is just kind of the name for the modality. I can adapt that to a coaching context, right? This is really wonderful for people who are in a stuck place, right? Maybe they're trying to make some big decisions and they're having a hard time with it. Maybe there are some goals that they want to achieve, but for some reason, there's some kind of, they just can't get there, right? And usually there's like some kind of inner obstacle. So one of the kind of main ways I would use to work with that is help people learn how to explore for themselves those stuck places within them, right? This is a part of us, like there's a part of us, something standing between us and something, right? And I'm talking more about like internal obstacles, right? Those internal stuck places. Obviously, there are external obstacles that can get in the way of us achieving our goals, but it's really about looking inside and teaching people how to work with that and how to transform those obstacles and essentially overcome them, right? But in a really healthy way, not where we're ignoring, like, oh, I'm having this inner obstacle I'm having is this deep-seated fear. Well, I teach people how to work with that fear in a healthy way, right? We're not just shoving it under the rug. And in that process, they can, get to a point where they're able to move towards their goals. Yeah. So that's how I would do it in coaching. And therapy, similar, but we are working with kind of a lot of inner psychological dynamics, especially with trauma, right? So we're working with a lot of painful, hurt feelings and emotions, memories, experiences, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what you were talking about in the beginning, the difference between the psychotherapy that you do and the coaching, because both are so important. We've had so many coaches on the show because a lot of times they get combined into one in the minds of, in the minds of our general public, but they're both so important. And so here at Heart and Solutions, we do two services. We do outpatient mental health therapy, but then we also do in-home behavioral health coaching and behavioral health service for children. And the way we describe those two services is therapy is the why, and then BHIS, behavioral health intervention, is the how and the action behind it. And coaching, fairly similarly, coaching is the what are we going to do? And it might not be what am I going to do in my life, but what am I going to do here in the coaching space together in the coaching relationship? And therapy is the why, exploring that why and exploring those pieces of ourselves, and not for any external reason, not looking for any external outcome necessarily, except for peace within ourselves, and peace within our own minds, and letting our minds be a safe place so that we can then do the work towards maybe some of those external goals that we want to achieve for ourselves in coaching.
Yeah.
And I love what you were saying too about the internal family systems and that parts work that you do in the therapy sessions. And I imagine in the coaching sessions too, you use that a lot. It reminds me of, there was a study done about how stress impacts certain organs within our bodies. And what they accidentally found in that study was that it wasn't the stress itself, it was the brain's thoughts about the stress that caused the damage, the physical damage to those organs. And when you're talking about those different parts of ourselves, that worrying part that is benefiting us in some ways, being able to take that part and keep the strategizing part and not have to focus on the worrying part. And when we do it intentionally in our brains make the change. It's amazing how a change in the way that we intentionally think, we don't even have to believe it. But if we change the way that we intentionally think, our brains change it, and our brains change our body chemistry to align with the new way of thinking.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And whenever I'm working in therapy or in a coaching capacity, for me, it's really about authentic transformation, right? And it's not about sweeping things under the rug, right? And ignoring the problem, so to speak. It's about how do we take these painful parts, these stuck places within ourselves? How do we heal them? How do we transform them into things that will help us, not only achieve our goals, but feel the way we want to feel, live the life we want to live. Yeah. And so in therapy, through the exploration that we can do, the inner exploration that we do in therapy, we can learn a lot about the why. Why am I like this? What's going on? We can get clarity around that. But beyond that, it's really about this inner healing and transformation, right? That can, put us in that can empower us to go out there and create the lives that we want to live, right? Achieve the goals, that kind of thing. So again, I do a lot of coaching type stuff in my therapy, right? And as a coach, because I am a psychotherapist, I bring that therapy lens into the work that I do, right? And so when people are trying to decide, do I need therapy? Do I need coaching? What? A lot of times people will hop on a, consultation call with me, and we'll talk about what's going on with them. And I'll talk about, okay, here's how therapy might be able to help you right now. Here's what coaching can do. Here are the limitations of coaching, right? Here's, I don't really want to think of therapy as having limitations, because I love good therapy and I've seen the transformation, but we really do talk about the differences so people can make an informed decision, right?
And therapy does have a lot of limitations. There are a lot of logistical limitations with therapy that coaching does not have. So being able to be in Iowa and have a coach that's in California is something that we can't always do in the therapy world,
Sure.
because there are a lot of logistical limitations on therapy as a profession and as in this field.
Right. And it's one of the reasons why I work as an online therapist. So I see clients as a therapist all throughout California. I used to have an office, but I just find that I can serve and help a lot more people if I'm working online. And, because I am licensed as a therapist in California, I'm, limited to seeing clients in California. As a coach, right, I've worked with people all over the place. So it is different, right? But it's not therapy per se. Yeah, but it's true. The logistics does play a role for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know at the beginning you mentioned that you had your own personal experiences growing up, which led you to try therapy yourself as well before going into the field. Can you talk about that process of finding a therapist for yourself?
Yeah. Well, when I started off, right, I was just struggling, right? A lot of anxiety and depression. I didn't know anything about therapy other than what I've seen, how we see depicted in the media, right? We don't really know what therapy truly is. And, if we only have the media as our source of information. So I didn't really know what I was doing. And I think I started by going through my insurance and being like, I think I need some mental health support. And they gave me some names, right? So, and I just kind of picked whoever on the list could see me, have availability. I didn't know anything about therapy. I didn't know I didn't think like, oh, I can shop around for a therapist, right? I was like, okay, I guess they're all the same and I just got to go. And, fortunately, I had some positive experiences with my first therapists. So, no, there wasn't a negative experience that completely turned me off from therapy. But yeah, and so that process was just me learning what therapy is and kind of how to be a client, right? What do we do in therapy? And it's going to look different for everyone, and every therapist is different. But I was really fortunate in that my early therapists, they really met me exactly where I was at, right? So I wasn't ready to delve into kind of deep trauma and a lot of painful life experiences. I wasn't, right? I was only able to kind of talk about certain aspects of my life experience and discomfort, right? But maybe not others, right? I was a newbie in the whole game. Now, I see psychotherapy as such a valuable tool, not only for healing, but for personal growth, right? And optimal self-growth, that I do have therapy that I go to myself. And I definitely, really get full use out of it, right? Because I'm a therapist, I've been a client for a long time. Yeah, so it's a little bit about my experience.
Yeah, it really kind of fits with your journey into becoming a counselor, seeking the understanding and knowledge of what makes us go, what makes us run, and then being able to use that information that you learned for yourself for other people, and for people who are on the fence about starting counseling. Sometimes it can feel like, well, I'm choosing between, maybe it's a financial barrier. I'm choosing between spending my money on counseling sessions for myself, or gymnastics or swim lessons, right, for my child,
Mhm.
or on something else that the family could spend the money on. And your example is I think so poignant here, of being able to invest that into ourselves so that we can then, in a healed way, help other people, and provide what we want to for other people, or what we need to for other people. So I think it's a great role modeling that you're doing, of utilizing that tool so that you are able to be your best self when you are with your coaching clients and with your counseling clients.
Absolutely. And, when I was in therapist grad school, right, to become a therapist, that was a requirement of the program I was in. We had to have a year of therapy, and I'm talking 52 consecutive weeks. Maybe we can take a week off here and there. Um, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And this is my personal opinion. I think good therapists also are therapy clients, right? They're doing the inner work on themselves so they can heal. We're human too, right? And that, because what's going on within us is going to affect how our ability to show up for the people we work with, right? Whether you're a therapist or a coach. So when people are shopping around for therapy, one of the questions that I invite people to consider asking is, are you in your own therapist? Right? Because that can be very, very telling. And so that's kind of all I'll say about that. It's my personal opinion, also my professional opinion as a therapist and a client.
So if someone is interested in starting either counseling or coaching with you, how do they reach out and how do they get started?
Yeah, there's a few ways. So my website is elisamartineztherapy.com, and you might have a link in your show notes. That's the fastest way, right? I offer free 30-minute consultations. So we can sit down, online via Zoom and really look at what's going on with you. What do you need? Might I be a good fit for what you're looking for? Maybe I'm not, right? But I have a big referral network of other coaches and other therapists who might be able to help. So that's totally free. I'm also active on Instagram at Creating Calm Confidence. And on my social media, I do a lot of interviews with other mental health professionals and coaches about a variety of emotional wellness topics, life topics. And so there's a lot of different content that I have on there, right? I interview people about different therapy modalities, different kinds of issues or diagnoses or struggles. So those are the best ways to find me. I'm also on LinkedIn, Elisa Martiez, LMFT. I'm also on, Facebook at Creating Calm Confidence. So lots of ways to find me.
Wonderful. And that consultation appointment, you're going to be able to learn about is counseling. If we're in California and we reach out, is the psychotherapy going to be my best route here to start, or is my coaching going to be my best route? And you can kind of individually help answer those kinds of questions in that consultation.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And that's why, I like to provide a full 30 minutes to talk, because that way you can really make an informed decision, right? About what's best for you. And again, I have a pretty extensive referral network, and I know a lot of wonderful coaches and therapists. So if I'm not the fit for you, I might know somebody who is, right? And I think the big thing that people don't understand is that you can shop around, right? If you call your insurance company and they're like, well, let me give you a list of therapists, right? You don't have to go with the first one you meet, right? Or have a phone call with, right? You can do a consultation, get a feel for it. You can do several consultations with different therapists. You can even do a first therapy appointment or a second, and at any time along the way, you don't have to continue with that person, right? Whether it's a therapist or a coach. So I really want people to be empowered to, pay attention to, the rapport you have with this person. Do you feel comfortable? Do they specialize in the kinds of things, the kinds of challenges you have, right? That's another big piece I could get into. But yeah, shop around.
Wonderful. So if you could give one suggestion to somebody who might be on the fence about starting counseling, what would it be?
You know what? One of the things that I would want people to say, other than shop around, is, you know what? You'll never know unless you try it, right? Give it a shot. What do you have to lose? A good therapist is going to meet you exactly where you're at, right? That's going to respect that, hey, maybe there are some things I don't want to talk about or explore, right now. That's okay. A good therapist is going to meet you where you're at and go at the pace that feels right for you. And so, yeah, you'll never know unless you try. So just, give it a shot, do some research, reach out, right? And you can stop at any time if you want, but you will probably discover that, wow, this is very different than what I thought it would be. And it's actually very helpful.
Yeah, love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm Elisa Martiez, and I need a counselor.
Awesome.
So do I. So does Krissa. We all do. And I love it when I see counselors in counseling. So important. I love it when I see anybody in counseling, but especially, gosh, in this field, it's so important.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm Krissa Hunt.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
So do you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the You Need a Counselor podcast. We are so grateful that you're here. Now, we want to hear from you. Text us or give us a call at 515-650-3231. You can also find and connect with You Need a Counselor on Facebook and Instagram. If you've enjoyed today's show, please take a moment to like, review, or leave a comment, as all of these things help others to find and benefit from the podcast as well. If you're in the state of Iowa and interested in mental health counseling or behavioral health intervention services, give us a call at 800-531-4236. And if you're a provider seeking play therapy CEUs, you can find us on patreon.com/youneedatraining. We'll see you for the next episode, Sunday at 5.